I'm Huon Hooke, and this is The Real Review. The wine we're tasting today is Coriole Rubato Fiano, 2019 vintage from McLaren Vale. So Coriole was founded just over 50 years ago in McLaren Vale, which was the 1969 was the first vintage. It's run by the same family that founded it, which is the Lloyd family. We're now into their third generation of Lloyds. Duncan, the winemaker, and Peter, the marketer and salesman, and their father Mark is still very much involved. Mark is pretty much the driving force behind Coriole during most of its existence. So Mark Lloyd was one of the first people in Australia to really understand how important Italian grape varieties were, which is interesting because he doesn't have an Italian background. A lot of people who excel with Italian varietals do have an Italian background, but not Mark. He was the first person to produce, not the first person to make a wine from Sangiovese, but the first person to produce a continuing line of Sangioveses. The first vintage of Coriole Sangiovese was the 1987, and they've been producing it ever since, so it's quite a long time. I think Mark Lloyd is a great food man, a great wine man, a great lover of all of the arts, including theatre and music, and he puts on a lot of these events, arts events in his vineyard. And he also has a restaurant and is very much into the nexus between great food and great wine, and that's what drove him to be a pioneer in the Italian varieties. So one of the other varieties, apart from Sangiovese, that the Lloyds at Coriole have been pioneering is Fiano. They've also got all sorts of wonderful things like Montepulciano and Barbera. But this is Fiano, which is not so common in Australia. It is native to the Campania region of central southern Italy, where it makes some very famous wines. And Fiano is normally a delicate dry wine, not necessarily an oaky wine, but it can be made in any style, of course, but this is normally a delicate dry white wine. So the wine we're tasting is the Rubato Reserve Fiano, and this is only the first vintage of this reserve wine that they've made. They have been making Fiano for a few more years than that, but this is a new reserve wine which is made from a selection of their best Fiano, and it's barrel fermented, so it's got more complexity and more savouriness than the regular Fiano. What does it taste like? Well, it's got a wonderfully complex nose. It's got a lot of, I would say, citrus fruit aromas, some nuttiness from the barrel ferment characters, some spice to it, a touch of lychee even, really layered and gorgeous flavour, gorgeous aroma. Anyway, let's taste the wine on the palate. Wonderful intensity of flavour. Really good mouth-filling properties, richness. It's still light on its feet, but it has great power, great intensity, great drive, length of palate. Excellent wine. There is some nuttiness there, but the oak is not obvious. I think they've done a wonderful job in making, in barrel fermenting the wine and keeping the oak at a level where you really don't notice it, but it adds complexity and it adds texture and it adds length to the palate. Wonderful. So how do we rate this wine? We rated it at 94, and we said it was a wine that you would drink between now and perhaps 7 or 8 years hence. It's rated number 2 out of 29 Fianos from the country, the entire country of Australia, from the 2019 vintage. So very, very highly rated indeed. So obviously being the second out of 29 Fianos from that vintage, it is a top rank wine. What sort of food would you serve with a wine like this? Well, we asked the winemaker Duncan Lloyd what he would serve with it, and he said he thinks this goes with quite full flavoured dishes, including pork, and he's even suggested roast pork with all the trimmings. I have no doubt that he's right, because these people, the Lloyds, know a lot about food and wine matching. But I would probably go for something a little more delicate myself than pork. But there is some tannin in this wine. There's a bit of grip to it, which comes from the skins and from the barrels. And that tannin will help it match stronger flavoured foods such as pork, which is obviously white-fleshed meat rather than red, would go quite well with this. So, cheers to Fiano. It has a great future in Australia.